welcome everybody to episode 192. And finally, we have Marie the Elephant from Everybody's Agnostic joining us tonight, and we're going to talk about I won't say quite a few, but a few different things that I will be honest, I know pretty much nothing about. So I'm going to learn tonight as everybody chuckles. um, But joining us as usual, Miss Morgan, how are you?
I am well, um, I am quite angry. I won't give any spoilers, but right now, the Game of Thrones writers have done pissed me off, and I am livid about it. And yeah, so there's that. But then also, I'm living for the Met Gala looks tonight, so hopefully that'll put me in a good spot.
Cool. And from I can't say frozen north anymore because like we're going into summer. So joining us is Miss Sam. How are you, Sammy?
Oh, but it is frozen still up in the Canada wastelands. Ha ha ha. No, it's nice up here now. Actually, the spring's coming in. It's been good. The kitty cats are going out on the balcony now. They're finally, accepting it that it's spring, so that's a good sign. They're like my groundhogs. They're kind of my sign. Spring's coming if they want to go out now.
Yeah, mine's pawing at the window trying to get out the screen. I live on a second floor.
There you go.
Yeah. And Maria, I don't even know what state you're in.
Oh, I'm in Minnesota with Marissa, Alexa McCool.
Oh, you're in the good state with some cool people.
Hertzie. Yep.
Awesome. And joining us is Marie the Elephant. And if I pronounced your last name wrong, please accept my apology.
You can say it however you want because I made it up.
Oh, okay.
Yay!
I don't feel quite so bad.
No, don't feel bad at all.
But you have a really interesting deconversion story. And I know you probably get to ask this 1,000 times, but fill us in a little bit about you and your deconversion and how you got to where you are today.
Oh yeah, and I can do the long story or the short story because there's.
Well, we have 2 hours, so
we can ease into it. So I'll start with the short, and we can go long wherever we want to go. But basically, I grew up in Minnesota, and my family is Christian, and I was raised thusly. At first Lutheran, and then I got more involved with a more conservative type church. It's a denomination called General Baptist Conference. So it's not Southern Baptist, but it's just kind of this conservative Midwestern version with lots of casseroles. And so I grew up in that, and I was all in it. I believed everything about it, and I was extremely sincere and ate it all up. If I questioned, I blamed it on myself. And right around 13 is when I first had some very serious doubts. And so between the ages of 13 and like my mid-20s, there was kind of this roller coaster of like, yay, Jesus, I love Jesus. He's the best. He talks to me all the time. Oh, he died on the cross for my sins. Like full throttle. And then like the doubts would get to me. And I would be going around saying, oh, I'm an atheist. But I didn't feel very secure in my atheism because I didn't have like a very good self-esteem. And I felt like my doubts, like it was really hard to lean into them because of how insecure I felt about myself and my ability to think critically or to be trusted to think well at all. But eventually, in my early 20s, I started segueing out of it after I left the missionary field in Mexico. I lived there for 2 years as a missionary with YWAM. And once I left that and came back to Minnesota, I kind of gradually, slowly deconverted. And then the last 10 to 12 years, I always feel like are supposed to be those years where you like I left religion and now everything is great because now I can think for myself and now science and now this. But it's actually pretty painful. And what I hear statistically is the more dedicated or the more serious or the more involved you were with your religion, the more trauma you deal with as afterwards. And that's kind of resonated with me and the people that I've run into. So I deal with a lot of internal shit from having deconstructed this framework that informed my entire world for so many years. So that leads me to where I am now, where I got very involved in the deconvert community, started listening to different podcasts like Life After God and Everyone's Agnostic. And then I just managed to murder someone and took over the show. And so...
Yeah, I saw that segment in your bio on their web, on the webpage, and I was like, "Oh, I missed that the first time I read this." It's like, yeah, you were actually a call-in at first, right? If I remember.
I was a listener for many years, and then I wanted to be on the show as a guest, so I invited myself on. They interviewed me for one episode, and then I came back for another episode to kind of do like a follow-up thing. And so then when I got the chance to meet the host last fall, I saw an opportunity, and that's when I murdered people. Just kidding. I didn't murder anyone, but I wedged myself in, and he was very interested in me participating. And so now I'm with you guys and talking about atheism, about deconversion, about deconstructing worldviews and living in a secular, humanistic kind of way. So that's the short version of how I deconverted.
Well, I think all three of us can kind of relate. I'm a former ministerial student.
Oh.
Yeah, I was also raised Lutheran. What the hell was I? Missouri Synod, duh. But I actually converted to Pentecostal Charismatic.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and Morgan, you went to a Jesus Campy school.
Yeah, like a Christian boarding school for troubled youth.
Oh, I didn't know about the troubled youth part.
Yeah. No, that's what they brand themselves as.
Ah, okay. And Sam, you were brought up pretty fundamentalist too, weren't you?
Shaking on the floor for Jesus there. I'm kind of worried. I see a pattern here. So you come on to shows, Maria, as a guest, and then you somehow become oh shit, I'm locking my door.
Well, I find that interesting because I mean, before I started doing Beyond the Trailer Park with Deb, God, almost 5 years ago now. Well, will be 5 years, a couple months, but that's how I weaseled my way onto 2 shows, and then I started my own on that platform. So it's like, yeah, I ended up being a guest and calling in all the time because nobody else was, and it was that type of show, and I felt bad because I knew the host, and it's like the next thing I know, I'm co-hosting it, and then I started my own show. So it's like, yeah, it's a freaky pattern. But now tell us
I did the same thing on what was it? No Religion Required, my podcast debut. So yeah,
I don't even remember how Deb and I decided to even approach you. I think it just kind of happened. It was like really weird.
Well, I can actually attest to that. There were a couple nights, I believe, shortly after meeting, where very similar to when Deb met Marissa, she was tickled pink by Morgan. She was like, "Sam, you got to meet this redhead. She's because you had redder hair at the time, I believe."
Oh yeah, I had bright red hair.
Yeah, just same thing. Like, you got to meet this chick. She's awesome, right? And like, yeah, she was just pumped. Honestly, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, that was at a bad spot for me, but yeah, I'm going to embarrass you, Marie.
Totally cool.
she asked before we started. She goes, "What happens if you gotta go pee during 2 hours?" And I'm like, "Well, I just fucking announce it because of my stroke, everybody's kind of used to it, and because Deb used to run the show, it was not that big of a deal. I could just get up and go. Well, now I'm doing all the techie shit, or trying to. And Sam, we still got to get together someday when work's not killing me.
I can show you XSplit, girl. I got it all figured out now. But we're the Avengers here, all right? We're Endgame, okay? You're in here for 3.5 fucking hours. Don't leave. You're not allowed. You're not allowed. That's all it is.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff happened during that time period where I was recovering. So I was like, I don't remember how we did that. But yeah, cool with me. She's a legal eagle, so it made me happy. So tell us about Everybody's Agnostic.
Right. So it's everyone. It's the same concept. Everyone's Agnostic is a podcast that was started 5 years ago by Cass Midgley, who is a very Southern gentleman from Tennessee. He sounds, as a Midwesterner, it was very difficult for me to get used to his accent, as well as yours. Well, at least some of you. It's a very strong accent, but I fell in love with that show. And so he's been doing that for 5 years. He started it because he used to be a pastor as well. He was a Christian all of his life, I know. And he encapsulated he encapsulated a lot of patriarchal bullshit too. His late 40s, I think, or maybe it was his late 30s, he ended up deconverting. And lost his faith, lost his church, lost kind of everything, all of his friends. And so he decided to start this show with his friend, Bob Pandillo, who is a atheist for life. So they thought it'd be kind of fun to have the straight man, like the guy who thinks like talking in tongues, that's crazy. And then like the Cass who's talking like from a point of view of having related, having done it, explaining, hey, like this is what it's all about, Bob. Don't be silly. Don't mock us. But so that was kind of the deal. And I really like the show. And basically what they do is what we do.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'm still in shock that I'm on the show. But what we do is we basically interview just pretty much anyone about their deconversion stories. We don't want to always be having big names. We want to, because everybody, everyone has a story to tell. And so we like to get many voices up there. I'm really trying to get on a lot more representation, less white men talking, more women, more trans people, more people of color, any other kind of representation I can think of. We had someone who was blind be on our show, and that was really provided a lot of insight into her experience. So that's, I mean, more or less, that's what we do. And the tone is such that we really strive to seek the nuance in the discussion. I think that's what drew me to the show in the first place, because when I was trying to look for resources for how to recover from religion, I ran into a lot of really angry atheist podcasts or shows, and those are there for a reason, because there's an audience for that, and that's valid. Personally, that wasn't what spoke to me. I wanted to have a more, what's the right nuance? We're just going to use the word nuance again. Never can use it enough. So I wanted to have a more nuanced conversation about our experiences and try to deconstruct them and especially work through the emotion of things, because I was still holding on to a lot of that stuff. So the tone of the podcast is such that we really do try to dig in and to not say a lot of blanket statements. We try to explore. The dynamic between Cass and I is pretty novel in respect to what the show has been. The show used to be, here's Cass, and then here's Bob, the wingman, who points out that this is not normal. Like the Christian behaviors are not normal to the rest of the world. But I'm not a sidekick. I'm a woman with a loud voice and a strong opinion who has been walked over by men, patriarchy and religion for way too long, and I'm done with that. So Cass and I had to have a conversation just to clarify, like, so do you want me as like a token woman, or are we talking real shit right now? And he's like, I want the real shit. So it's been super fun because Cass and I challenge each other a lot, and we respect each other a lot. And so it's this really kind of healthy dynamic of building each other's knowledge up, which personally, I just fucking love it. It feels so healthy, and I love the dynamic. So I guess that's essentially all we do. We just give platforms to people to share their story, and yeah, I mean, it sounds so simple, but it's
really, I mean, when Deb and I originally started Beyond the Trailer Park, her and I had a similar dynamic. She deconverted when she was, Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, in her teens, right? Sam?
Damn mute button. Fuck ass shit. Ugh.
She was
14,
about
14.
14.
The age of reason, you know.
Yeah. And she did it pretty much overnight. Joke everybody's probably sick of hearing. Whereas for me, it took over 10 years. But I was pre-internet.
Yeah.
And I was also pre-Richard Dawkins' God Delusion. And I joke about that because seriously, had I read that book back when I started my deconversion, it probably would have been a lot fucking easier.
Yeah.
And I think what really helped me is shows like yours where people talked about what they went through and, you know, the nuance of deconverting. And at the time, I mean, and I've stated this a few times, my internet back then was bulletin boards and news groups. There was nothing like, Facebook didn't even exist. I don't even think Google existed back then. I mean, so, you know, we didn't have stuff like, you know, the podcasts that we have today or the vlogcast like Holy Crap, which is, we'll say a sister show. We're all friends with Shujin, so excuse me. But yeah, I think I'm kind of an angry atheist, but I'm not an angry atheist. There's I waver back and forth depending on what's going on out of the administration, and the current administration has me so fucked off that I've been avoiding anything related to that because I really don't want to have another stroke. But I started being more vocal because of the bullshit with the LGBTQ issues. For me, primarily the L at the time. And, you know, it was crazy. And then I got involved in deconstructing the whole Dominionist movement when Sarah Palin was running for VP. So it's like, but I can see your point where getting into people's stories and what they've been through, and, you know, the whole notion of religious trauma syndrome, which is a real thing. And the author that coined that term, her name is eluding me at the moment. But, you know, I got into reading about that because even today, I've been an atheist now 22 years. I think. And I still catch myself with some baggage. Now, I didn't have the whole patriarchal issue as it's today, like it is today. I mean, it was probably there, but it was not something that was acknowledged. And most of the guys, you know, most of the men in my life didn't seem to act like that. You know, I didn't have to deal with the toxic masculinity, as you put it as when you sent me the email to come on and stuff. And I didn't have to. I either didn't recognize it, or I won't say it wasn't occurring because I'm pretty sure it was, but I didn't have to deal with it. But so many people that I have met, I mean, yes, granted via the internet, but to me, they're just as real as my in real life friends. So yeah, I mean, the stuff that we, as as an atheist community, I think has grown, for lack of a better word, as the technology to talk about it has.
Yeah. Yeah, what I really value is that there are so many shows out there, and that there is such a variety of formats and of tone and of conversation. And I think that they're all super necessary. And I think at first when I got involved, I thought about like, oh yeah, everyone's agnostic is the best. And I thought that for like maybe a day. And then I realized like we're all working together
For the same thing.
the same goal. Yeah. And it's the great thing about us not being religious is that we recognize that there are many methods to get to that goal, and they're all equally as valid because they get to that goal and they appeal to different people. And so I am extremely cognizant of the fact that everyone's agnostic is not going to appeal to everyone, and
Exactly.
I'm totally cool with that. Like, people are going to want to listen. You know what? You know who doesn't listen to my show? Any of my partners. None of them listen to it. That's fine. I don't give a fuck. Like, they listen to other stuff that appeals to them, so, and I expect that out of the rest of the world too. Just, I just want people to find stuff that works for them. And so I'm always super excited to be like on other people's shows, like your show, or to have people on our shows from other shows. Like, for example, this weekend we're going to have an episode released that we interviewed Steve Hilliker, who does Voices of Deconversion. And so we'll be talking to him and about his show. And so I love promoting other shows because we're all working together.
Well, I have been blogging since like 2001 in various formats, and after a debacle that occurred about 10 years ago, I really started to think seriously about it, not as a money-making venture. I have no interest in making money out of anything that I do. And I had a comment one day that said, "Oh, your blog's only at that point it was only maybe 100,000 views. Oh, you only have 100,000 views. Your point of view is pointless." I said, "You know what, fuck stain? I don't." Oh, I called him a fuck stain, and yes, it was a guy. And I'm like, you know what? You want to know why I do my blog? Because I want to do my blog. I don't give a fuck who reads it. I don't really give a fuck about the numbers. And what I write about or towards is because I have all this shit running through my brains. I have one brain.
I want a second brain.
I was like, Beth has evolved.
Beth is part Stegosaurus with the brain in the tail.
Yeah. But it's like I do what I do because I like it, not because I think, and I'm not taking away from any podcasters or bloggers that do, try to make a living off it. I mean, just doing what I do now can be a headache because I do work outside my little hole in the wall here. Actually, I work downstairs. So I just, when something hits me, I write about it. I don't give a fuck who reads it. And I try to make sure what I do write, though, is factual. And if it's opinion, I say this is just my opinion. But yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily care about numbers. And like you said, I mean, and this is something that Deb and I have always pushed, the more voices, the merrier. I mean,
absolutely.
The more people we have talking about the issues, whether it's from the Angry Atheist side, which was a great show when it was on. I don't know if it's still on, though. I don't think it is. The better. You can have, I mean, like me, I'm just a scatterbrain. So I have fun doing this. I tell people it's four chicks or 3 chicks and a guy, whatever, on a phone for the whole fucking world to hear. And if you like what you hear, fine. If you don't, fine. And that's the way I look at it. And I think the more shows like that, the better. Now, you recently had a guest too, talking about some of your guests that really intrigues me. The guy with ALS.
Oh, Dave Warnock.
Yeah, I'm contemplating getting him on, but and not to knock him, just go on every show you can, get your story out there. Is that he's on so many atheist shows? It's like, yeah, and there's Beth bringing up the tail, but I still may contact him. But
No
yeah.
judgment. I'm his agent, so if you want to work with him, let me know.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's even better.
Yeah. Yeah, you want
Yeah.
him, you got him. He
Yeah.
lives for this stuff.
Yeah, I
I
just
mean, literally.
well, yeah. I just feel bad because I know he's like, and this kind of self-deprecating in a way, but like I know, didn't he just do Dogma Debate?
Yeah, he was out in LA
It's
a
like,
couple of weeks ago and did
yeah,
Dogma
it's
Debate.
like, oh yeah, I really want to compete with them.
No. It's not like that. It's not like that at all.
I
Like,
know it's not, but I'm like, that's sometimes what, even though I know in my head that I just do this for fun,
yeah.
then you have people like Dogma Debate and some of the shall say more professional produced. I'm like, yeah, no, I just, Google and here we go.
Yeah. We only got Dogma Debate because I asked. And usually when you ask and you got a dying person, people tend to be drawn to that. So I've had a lot more yeses than nos just because he's dying. So there's something appealing about that. People are drawn to death and drawn to people who want to talk about death.
I think what draws me to his story, not that he's dying, is the fact that he's living his life to the fullest. And as mushy as this may sound, since my strokes, that's kind of what I'm trying to do myself, although I'm agoraphobic. I don't leave my house. In fact, I had plans to do something on Saturday and then fucking fell asleep an hour before it started. So, but yeah, so I find it fascinating because I think a lot of people like me who have a chronic illness or an acute illness, or like I also I suffer from chronic pain and stuff like that, that are dealing with health issues. To meet a person like Dave would, or to hear him, talk about what he's going through, I think is helpful in a way.
Yeah.
And that's how I look at, like, at least what I try to do is, like, you bring on the quote little people. I mean, I love some of the big names, I won't lie, but everybody has had them. They have their own platform. They don't need me.
Yeah. You know what I don't like about the people that everyone knows? They've told their story too many times. They're too polished, and you listen and you're like, okay, here's a TED Talk.
Mhm.
And not that there's anything against that, but there's some really raw appeal to talking to someone who's never talked about it before, particularly in a public venue. And so like they'll come onto the show and they're extremely nervous, and most everyone will say, it's not that interesting of a story, it's not that good. And all you have to do is just dig in a little bit and ask the questions, and oh my God, they have some great stories to tell, some great experiences, great advice. I learned something from every guest. Every fucking guest blows me away. Like, we interview them usually on Sunday mornings, and the rest of my day I'm just like, whoa, like mind blown.
Like, well, we had Vicky Garrison on, who happens to be I'll say acquaintance. We're not like, buddy friends, but I had been following her story with No Longer Quivering for years because I got into, the whole thing with the Dominionists and Quiverfuls, an offshoot of that bullshit. For those not familiar, if the Duggars 19, well, no, I think they're up to 21. Bazillion kids and counting. Duggars are Quiverful. And Vicky was in, so I found her story fascinating because, it's not something that was spoken about when I was growing up. And then to find this cult, as I call it. It was like, and the funny thing is, she had just come out maybe a year or two as being an atheist. But what was funny is, I think it was the first interview. We were talking, and I asked her a question. I can't remember what it was, and she immediately went into that. I call it the preacher mode. Like, she never left. I mean, she just was like in that jive, and it was like, holy shit, you flashed back, girl. And one of my friends who happened to be listening was like, that was fascinating. You could see, because she said you could see, because we're video, you could see in her eyes the second she changed into that mode. And a lot of people, and that's kind of, even though I hate being on video, I kind of like that, because then you can see people's reaction to things. And, it's like, yeah, it's cool to hear other people's stories. And I think that's what's important, is that the more people, whether you're LGBTQ, whether you're into social issues, whether you're just railing against our, government intrusion in religion, or vice versa, SOCUS issues, I think the more we can get it out there, the better.
Yeah.
And that's why, didn't we have you on as a guest first, Morgan?
Yes, you did.
Okay, I have a shit memory, so, and that's why I found Morgan's story so interesting, because I used to be a camp counselor at a Jesus camp type camp. It wasn't Jesus camp, but it was pretty fucking damn close. And then to hear her story of she basically went to a Jesus camp school, it was like,
Yeah, it's wild. I've had a normal life.
yeah, no. So what do we want to hit next, so I can make an ass out of myself?
Oh, no. See, like, I just like talking about these things. It doesn't mean that I'm knowledgeable. Like, that's
you're probably okay. We're gonna go with the big one for me.
okay.
For the simple reason, and I'm not dissing anybody, this is pure me. I don't understand polyamory at all. I can't I don't have a problem with somebody being polyamorous. I don't have a problem with that. Like, how does a fuck stain like me wrap their head around? I just can't wrap my head around this.
I can try to tell you what I know.
Cracking up. And Sam, it was Sam and Morgan, you guys chime in too, because I know you guys are
poly co-hosts. Yeah, like we.
I know you guys know way more than this shit about this shit than I do.
So it was a really popular sort of like progressive rock band in the early 90s, and then it wasn't that popular in the early 2000s, but then Poly's coming back now. It's got a lot of fans now. All the members of the band are dating. That's kind of where the joke comes in. So,
Sam, you just confused the fuck out of me. What the hell are you talking about?
You've never seen Polly and the Amories? It's a band, right? Isn't it? Isn't it Pauline and her Amories? No.
Oh, no? God. I'm into punk, but that doesn't ring a bell.
Wouldn't that be a great band? Oh.
I'll tell you a story. So like anything that I ever knew about polyamory was always like, ew, gross. Like for like the last, like all of my life until like about 5 years ago, I first heard about polyamory. And the crazy thing is I heard about it in this support group for former fundamentalists. We get together, we talk about our shit. And in the support group, one of the ladies like randomly brings up, she's like, out of everything I don't understand polyamory. And she just got all worked up. She's like, why are all these atheists getting into polyamory? Like, good, let go of God. But like she just had this like disgust for poly. And I can't not forget that. Like, it was just such blatant judgment.
I don't have disgust, and it's not a matter of judgment. I just don't understand.
No. That's no. I wasn't sharing that to say that that's you.
Oh,
Not at all.
no. I'm just saying. I don't know if maybe it is religious baggage, but it's just like I just it might
It's
have. I'm. I've always been a one person, always my entire life, and actually after the last fucking disaster, I'm now consider myself asexual. And it took and Sam, I don't know if you were in on any of these conversations that I had with Deb about it, but it took me a good 2 years to even admit that, because I was like, I was like, my last girlfriend actually ripped off my best friend, who happened to be my landlord. So when she moved where I live now, she was from Jersey. I mean, basically, I gave her $100 allowance a week. This was pre-stroke, so I was actually working 2 jobs so I could afford it. And I mean, my landlords at the time were basically, they would give you the fucking underwear out of their drawer if you didn't have any. I mean, ask them anything. They lent me buku bucks when I got into some financial trouble, and it took me 3 years to pay them off. I mean, there's nothing that if I needed something, they would make sure I had it. She got hooked up with some lowlifes, and I told her, don't hang with these people. They're not good people. Ended up literally ripping twice. They went, I had keys to my landlord's house because I used to dog sit. She would take my keys, and she went up there. Well, went up there and actually robbed, and she ended up going to court and then going to prison. And it's like, I forgot the point of this.
Something about polyamory?
Oh, yeah, and it's like, I decided after that, that's it, I'm done with fucking dating. I'm done with it, done with getting in, so that, that was 7 years ago, and it took me that time up, and then 2 years ago, I finally admitted that, okay, I'm asexual. So it's not that it disgusts me or I find it straight, I just don't understand it. But
yeah,
I know there are issues as far as how someone like me, or someone that thinks it's gross, disgusting, the fundy bullshit. I mean, how would, somebody like me learn to understand it even, better, to be an ally, as another point you had brought up.
Well, I don't want to equate being poly with any of the letters in LGBTQIA.
I've seen that.
Thank you, because I have seen some people be like, "Oh, I'm part of your community." I'm like,
No,
no,
you're not. You can be LGBTQ and polyamorous, but I have seen so many straight people be like, "Oh, me being poly is exactly the same as." I'm like, no.
Yeah,
Please stop
and I
talking.
think that's where my question's coming from, because I've seen that also, and it's like, okay, no, I don't think you're really part of being LGBTQ.
Yeah. I mean, there's identity politics, but there's also just statistics. Like, there's no history of poly people being dragged out into the street and killed or beaten up for being poly. It's just not the same. It is a marginalized group, but then again, like, I don't know. I really just don't want to put my identity out there as being like a part of that. Personally, that's not something I'm comfortable with. But in terms of like someone who's open-minded and wants to understand poly, or at least empathize with the choices that people make to be poly, there's the least amount of work would be to read a book like Ethical Slut is a really good one. It talks a lot about non-monogamy, and in that, it kind of deconstructs a lot of monogamous culture. You don't have to agree with it in the end, but it's definitely informative, as well as another book called More Than Two. They're both just books about, whether it's opening your marriage, whether it's becoming poly, whether it's just kind of learning about who you are. Like, are you solo poly? You're looking for a triad? Are you looking for what kind of dynamic are you looking for? It basically deconstructs all of monogamy as being the formula for literally every fucking relationship ever, and says, no, actually, you have a whole bunch of choices you can pick from, and also probably keep in mind some of these ethics as you make your choices. So those are two fantastic books to read if you're looking to learn more about it. Don't be afraid that if you read it, that it's going to convert you against your will. It won't. If you don't want it, you won't feel it, but you'll at least learn why people like myself may have chosen to do this, and what goes into our mind, what happens behind the scenes in our brain, like to make us choose this path. So for me, I just want to provide a little bit of background in terms of my sexuality and like what led me here. I'm, just to be clear, I'm cis. I'm mostly straight, and I would say like heteroromantic, maybe mildly bisexual. There, when I was growing up, I was coming of age in like the late 90s, where conservative Christianism was really having a heyday, and loved to talk about my vagina and men's penises and how we were supposed to be super pure. There was a big movement called True Love Waits at the time.
Oh,
Burn the ring. Burn the ring.
Oh my God. Oh.
Yeah, trigger.
Oh.
Yeah. It was
My
horrible.
childhood right there. My childhood right there.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. I feel you. So I grew up in that, and I ate it all up. I was like, yeah, Jesus. And I was like, courtship, not dating. And I was pretty counterculture within my own group.
Courtship.
That whole
I love that word,
courtship, not
courtship.
dating
Oh.
thing. Yeah, they pushed that heavy at my school, but they
Oh.
did allow people to date, but you had to have like the dorm parents' permission, and then like your actual parents' permission. It's how they got around a lot of like, oh, we don't ban interracial dating. It's just your backwards parents who sent you here don't want you to. Oops.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
It's
bonkers.
fucked up. Yeah. And that they taught, that mostly it was an emphasis on women, and that we need to maintain our purity. And there was all sorts of terrible metaphors. Like the one that I got was this piece of construction paper, this other piece of construction paper, you put glue on them. This is when they have sex. But then they're going to break up. And now you've got like little pieces of each construction paper on the other one. And they're all fucked up now. So your boyfriend goes away, you get a new one, you have sex, and now you're ripping apart. And so it's like the symbolism is that every person you have sex with takes a part of you, and you become broken, you become less whole.
They're big on that metaphor, but for us, it was like a piece of tape, and they're like, see, now it can't bond with anybody because it's been used.
How does that even apply? God. That's not how vaginas work.
Or like passing around a cup and having everybody spit in it and being like, now do you want to drink it? Like that, or a piece of gum, or, it's absolutely crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the shit that I grew up in, and I loved it. I loved it because I was terrified of boys, and I had such a high libido, and I loved boys, and I thought they were all so cute, and I wanted them all to ask me out. So I didn't talk to any of them because boys are terrifying. And so
I mean, as a bisexual, same. So that's basically why I just was like, no one, nobody, everyone terrifies me.
Yeah.
I find that interesting because I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and I've known since I was old enough to know anything, which was about 5, that I'm gay. Okay? When you screw around with your neighborhood pal and take baths together, you kind of know. But when I hit my teens, the only role model I had was Renee Richards. who, for those of you that don't know, I've mentioned her before, is a transgendered woman who was a tennis player, friends with Martina Navratilova, was my other role model. Even though we all knew that Martina was, she never actually came out until much later in her career. So I had no role models. I was like, okay. But I didn't, as I've jokingly said, I didn't really give a shit because all I cared about at that point in my life was hockey. If I had a hockey stick, I was happy. I didn't give a shit. It wasn't until I hit my 20s that I was like, but by then I had gone through the whole bullshit of because I was still a believer, rectifying it with the Bible and yada, yada, yada. So, but the purity culture is like, it just came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's like, holy fuck. I mean, I was, long past that stage of being influenced by it, at church or even while I went to a public school. And by the 90s, I would consider myself then an agnostic. I wasn't an atheist yet till about 98. So it's like, yeah, the purity culture and then tying it in with, whether you're polyamorous or LGBTQ, it just blows my mind.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
It's like,
And see, I was not raised with the female purity logic, but I was raised in such an interesting branch of Pentecostalism where if you were born with a penis, you're obviously a rapist by birth. And so they still gave you that purity logic, but it was from like a guilt perspective, like you were just born dirty, you were born wrong. It's like, how dare you look at that girl and think she's pretty? Oh, I'm sorry. Like, oh crap.
Yeah. Yeah, we both
yeah.
genders as binary constructs anyway got very different messaging in a way, but both very toxic as fuck. I hear, people who were raised as men talk about that a lot of the time, that they still struggle with guilt for just finding people attractive because they were, taught that, looking at someone is lust, and lust is a sin, and that's the same thing as adultery, and
Stab
adultery
your
is
eyes
bad.
out, Jesus, like all the like chop off your hands if you still can't help it,
We're all hurt by purity culture, all of us. And that's the messaging I got, and like I said at the time, I liked it because it gave me a ticket to not have to deal with men, to not have to deal with my feelings, because God was my matchmaker. God was going to hook me up. I wasn't going to have to deal with dating or flirting or whatever, because I could outsource it to Jesus.
This was your Tinder.
Yeah, basically. I didn't have to worry about any of it. And I thought that all of my cohorts were just children for dating and kissing people that I knew that they weren't going to marry. And I judged all of them. But so basically that was my sexuality. And I was horny. I was very horny as a teenager, and was not taught about masturbation, was not taught about any kind of sex yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a sin, which didn't mean that I didn't do it. I did it sometimes, but not I didn't touch myself. I just rubbed things, And so and that was like when AOL came out. So I would sex.
Is this sex? Just start rubbing.
My dick's shit, 10 inches long.
Oh, is this? What is this? This feels nice. I'm so touch deprived from religion. Anything feels good. Oh my God! Holy crap.
Yeah.
Well, it's like Deb and I used to joke because, for both of us, I mean, she was a little bit younger than I was. Both of us were basically, here's a book, read it. I remember when the first time I had my dot, I was 11 years old, and Mom's like, here you go. I'm like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this? And this was before pads, long before, so it was like, you're basically wearing a fucking girdle. Well, no, not a girdle.
Those, yeah.
Yeah, girdle isn't the right.
Beth, how old are you? You make it sound like Wild Western times.
Oh my God!
We had a lot of newspaper out in the shack out back that you had to shove in your cooch there and hope for the best when the bandits are coming.
Let me ask you this, Sam. How old do you think I am?
I think that when I reach my 40s, I want to age as beautifully as you have.
Oh.
I'm in my 50s, honey.
Okay, but when I reach my yeah. So.
Yeah, I have. It's funny you say that because if it wasn't for my fucking grays, and I usually have a bandana on, so people don't usually see my hair or hat. I've had people think I was like 32, and I had this one coworker when I worked at the plant who was like, "Don't you something like, don't you young and tell me what to do?" And I'm like, "Bitch, I'm fucking 30 years older than you." She's like, "What?"
Youngin.
She was a loon, but yeah. Well, thank you, Sam. But yeah, it's funny because like my generation, for those of us that are older, in our 50s, I mean, in the 70s, it was just like, here's a book, here's your what do you call them? Garter strap. It was a garter strap setup.
Oh.
Yeah, it was fucking horrid. Trust me. It was like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with that?
Clips
That
and buckles and shit. Oh my god.
Yes,
No.
it was like, oh
They look so
no.
medieval. Like
Yes,
they do. They look like torture devices. Like it's very.
I was never.
Repent of your sins on the crusade. Like put this on.
I know this is a wee bit off topic, but it's like I was never so happy to see a fucking tampon when they finally came out. I was like, oh yes, I don't have this diaper rubbing between my legs while I'm playing hockey. Because I used to play semi-pro softball, and I played ice hockey in a women's league that traveled all through Canada, actually all through the States too. But it was like, yeah, try playing hockey with that thing between your legs.
2 words, Diva Cup.
Yeah.
That shit's good.
Well, I'm past that stage now, so I don't worry about it.
That's nice.
Yes, it really is, and it's been good 10 years.
Yeah.
The hot flash.
I mean, same for me. I got an IUD though, so.
Yeah, but it's like, for me, like even just talking like we are now, and this would never happen.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s and 80s. It did in the 90s, but I think it was so twisted by the stupid purity culture.
Yeah.
And while it didn't affect me personally, I knew people that it did. And
yeah, and it impacted the culture as a whole as well.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the whole way we look at sex and talk about sexuality and stuff, it's still very much, I mean, if you look at the United States, it's still very
Puritan.
I mean, yeah, I mean, in the United States has always been more prudish because of a religious influence and some other factors as well. But I mean, still, even as connected as the rest of the world is, it seems like we're still so behind on that aspect.
I find it funny now that I think about it. Deb would be so proud of me because to get me to talk about this kind of stuff was like, yeah, no.
Like pulling teeth.
She would be, Beth.
Yeah,
be very proud.
I think what it comes down to though is the more people that I've come in contact with, whether I'll have through the internet and that I talk to, it's kind of gotten, and I jokingly say old lady because I do actually have very prudish views, and I'm trying to get rid of them, but it's not that easy. And that's why when you wrote your interest, I was like, I don't know shit about that. I know absolutely nothing about that. Okay, I know a little bit about that, but I'm probably wrong. I was like, oh fuck, no. I couldn't even come up with a script for this because usually I'll write out, I have questions all planned out, and I'm like, I have sat since we initially tried to get you on, and it's like, I had one question.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, I was relatively prudish before I started being poly, because I think part of it has to do with experiencing some extent of it, because otherwise you don't know anything else, and all you have is what is ingrained in your head, which is hard to get out unless maybe you read some books or expose yourself to it or do it. So I don't think you should beat yourself up for not knowing anything about it.
I'm being facetious in a sense that I think it's important because I think people like me who are like just totally baffled, I think it's important that we say, hey, I don't understand this, and to learn about it. And I think that's one of the best things about Beyond a Trailer Park is that we've hit some issues that I know nothing about.
Isn't that exciting?
Like XSplit, right?
Like XSplit, yeah. Fucking XSplit. But
one of these days, Beth, I'm gonna get like a hug and a smack the first time I meet you.
yeah, but I think, well, I'm a nerd, and I embrace being a fucking geeky nerd because, you know, I will research a topic to fucking death. Just read my blog posts, where most people have 3 or 4 links to reference material. I have about 100. But
citation's important, though. It really is.
Well,
Not enough people do it. Not enough people do it.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean,
that's why Poop Lady is big, you know?
It's why everybody's dumb.
Yeah. And see, I grew up like, you know, through my schooling. You know, I never graduated from college, but even in high school, because I did take AP English and it was pure writing, was that you cite your sources, you explain where you got your information from and why you think the way you think, and then people can go explore these sources for themselves. And well, Sam just brought up Poop Lady, which is Gillian Epperly, and people have heard me talk about her, but she'll cite sources, but the sources she reads don't agree with her. So there is yeah,
that's the worst. You cite something that disagrees with you. That's
awkward as hell.
Well, I think because I'm working on another piece. Yeah, I have 30. I will have 33 blog posts hopefully by the end of the week about her.
Is that one for every year that you've been alive, or?
I wish that would be over 50.
You never let me compliment you properly.
But in her book, for an example, was it in her book? Yes, it was in her book. She believes that drinking this massive amount of salt is a magic juju and cures everything from A to Z, including homosexuality. And her recommendation is for approximately 24 times the RDA consumption of salt. Her reasoning for, well, one of her reasons, I should say, is that there was a article she read about a power plant, an actual power plant, electricity power plant, that used the salinity differential between freshwater and saltwater to create, yeah. Morgan, you got it. That was one of her rationales for why drinking this amount of salt was good. So yeah, I think.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep this nuclear rod in the back of my shed because you know the plant's efficient there. It's not gonna hurt me. It's like an eyeball growing out of my head. Like, no, it's not gonna hurt me.
Because we all know the human body works just like a power plant.
Yeah,
but it's the same.
It's like, okay, so most people would not look at the source and figure out that she was full of shit. Well, bad analogy. But yeah, it's like, I think it's important that, you know, we can give source material where we're getting our information. And the 2 books, remind me to have you send me the title so I can post it in the show notes and so I can put it in my wish list. But I think that's important, and that's why I like shows like ours, and you know, everyone's agnostic, and all the other shows that say, hey, you know, this is what I read, this is what might help you to understand more. And that's why I kind of jumped when you sent your intro. I was like, Okay, I know nothing about this, but we're gonna do it anyways. Fucking go with it and see what an ass I make on this. But
you have yet to make yourself an ass, so I think we're good.
I'm the type of person, I don't really care. I mean, I do, but I don't. It's like, you know what? If more people were able to say, hey, I don't understand this, the better.
Yep.
And the more we can talk about it, yeah, I'll make a few blunders, but I might embarrass myself or TMI too much, but I don't really give a flying fuck because it's all on my blog anyways.
Yeah, we've been pretty forward on this show. I think you can TMI the fuck out of our fans at this point. We'll probably be okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
we talked about some nasty shit on here. I think we'll be all right.
I figure if they can deal with some of the bullshit things I did while recovering, they'll be fine. So.
Oh, you were awesome. Don't even.
No, it's just yeah. So going along in the same vein of being an ally, although you did correct me on, not conflating polyamory with LGBTQ, define what you mean by being an ally.
Making sure to wear a safety pin at all times.
Oh God.
Yeah.
That does so much. It really does.
You never know when your clothing's gonna fuck up and you need a quick fix, or your tuck comes undone. Like, clothing pins come in handy. You have no idea, girl. Oh my God,
fashion accessory and a very passive aggressive way to say you're super cool and woke.
What does
not have to do anything at all. It's a thing that happened where it was
right after Trump got elected.
I remember hearing about it, but I never.
Wasn't it the mothers that were giving hugs to gay people whose parents were abandoning them or something like that? That's how it started, something like that? Oh, yeah, show up your screen. Show up your screen there. Beth, click on your screen for a moment.
Yep, I gotta find my mouse.
Okay, yeah.
So this is not my sweatshirt, just to be clear. But yes, it was this very trendy thing to do after that, to show that you were supportive of immigrants, that you're supportive of women. And it was supposed to be this way that you could quietly tell anyone in your space that you were their ally and that you'd stand up for them. And at first, white people really liked it. They're like, oh yeah, this is a great way to be super woke and be allies. But then it was pretty quickly obvious from those who they were trying to ally to that, hey, maybe you could actually do something that's helpful. March?
No, don't
maybe y'all could have voted. I don't know. That would have been helpful.
Send prayers, all right?
Maybe stand up when shit's going down and don't let me be I don't know, actually do something. So the
interest thoughts and prayers, but I mean,
very close. That's white
kind
people
of almost even worse because it's you're not even asking a supernatural being you believe in for assistance.
You're putting the onus on them. You're hey, immigrant, if you need me, call me. Here's a safety pin, instead of being no, I'm going to proactively get involved. I'm going to do something about this instead of wearing a safety pin. I mean, the intention is nice, but it's not enough. But to be fair, maybe 3-4 years ago, I was that person. I was that person a while ago. I was, and I like talking about this because most people don't talk about being racist, and I'm racist. I am, and I'm bigoted. And I can't help it because this is the culture that I was raised in. And I think the sooner that we can notice that inside of ourselves, the sooner we can get somewhere. Because instead, everyone else is going around no, I'm not homophobic. No, I'm not racist. Yeah, you are. You live in the system. It's ingrained in your head. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, and also people think racism is this kind of caricature. And I think we've seen this in movies and in media so much that a racist is someone who's wearing a Klan outfit and going to rallies and,
my neck of
using racial slurs. And I mean, and that kind of thing. And people aren't realizing it's institutional as well. That's the big part of it. And I mean, even to the point where we are having, Nazis walking in the streets and they're well, you can't just call everyone you don't like a Nazi. And I'm he's wearing a swastika.
Yes, I can and I will. And I did a video on YouTube, I think it was right after Charlottesville, and it was basically, you know, there's fucking Nazis walking in the streets of America. Now, because of my interest in the whole Nazi culture going back pre-World War II, I know that a lot of the history of it, and like the whole thing with the saying "Make America Great Again," America First. Those are all American Nazi primarily slogans from back in the 20s and 30s. Now, one caveat to that is, yes, I believe Hillary Clinton at one point when she was running for president, not recently, but the first time, made a similar but slogan, and so did Barack Obama. So I think some people use it.
They did it differently though. Like Barack said, Barack said America can be great again. Huge difference.
Yeah, as I said, you have to get into the context of how it's being used.
And it's intentionally a callback is what the thing is. Like, it's intentionally sending a message, but also at the same time, which is a tactic of these people, is to have this plausible deniability. Because then when you call it out, it's like, oh, no, you're the one that's hysterical and crazy. You think I'm a Nazi, but at the same time, they're, able to do that wink, to the people who are in on it, essentially. But at the same time, being able to deny it when actually confronted. And that's really how I feel like we got to where we are, because it's this institutional racism that people don't want to call out, because then, oh, you look crazy. Oh, you're just trying to find racism in everything. And I'm like, because for the most part it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize that years ago, to be honest. Like when the Black Lives Matter movement really became like front and center in the news, because Black men kept on getting shot in scenarios where they shouldn't have, and still are, thank you, and always have been. When that happened, I was like, what's the deal with these guys? Like, why do they want to make everything about racism? Like, it really seems like, this is old me talking, don't take me out of context. Old me was like, we're post racism. I really thought that. I was like, the only people left who are racist are those literal Nazis or like white supremacists, but they're not a big group. And these people of color, whomever, are just giving into their victim mentality or whatever. I didn't say it so meanly, but I really just had some serious doubts about all of this. And let's just say I did some really serious growing and learning and acknowledging.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like you at all now. Is that?
I mean, like, those thoughts are sometimes still there because like I'm trying to say, like, I'll speak for myself. I can't speak for everyone, right? But I have internalized racism, whether I agree with it or not. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's super important to get educated on what's actually happening right now, so that for me, I needed to get educated so that I didn't interpret things in a racist way. You know what I mean? Like, misinterpret what's really happening. And now that I've deconstructed or deconverted from an unwilling racist mentality, I'm able to see things a little bit more for what they are. I never really will, because I am white, so I can't see those things.
Well, I think a lot of it too, Marie, and this is something we mentioned before we went live, when I was talking about who and her recent giant video that I'm deconstructing, is that being that we all have a religious background, a lot of that is institutionalized in the whole religious dogma. And yeah, I'm referring to the Nephilim and the Genesis 6 giants, because a lot of the like the KKK and the white supremacist movement, a lot of them, if you take it back to their root ideology, is biblically based. and it's based in the Genesis 6 giants. And depending on which angle they take it, and there's many different directions, it goes back to the serpent seed doctrine, which is ingrained in a lot of primarily the groups down in the southern half of the country, not the South per se, but in like Texas, even Arizona and New Mexico. At the heart of a couple of the groups that are based down there, they state right on their website that it's this serpent seed doctrine. And for those that don't know, it's basically that when Cain was born of Adam, and when Eve was deceived by Satan, a lot of people interpret that as Satan fucked Eve. Therefore, Cain was a bad seed. Ham of Noah, his son, was a descendant of Cain's. You get the whole Ham was black.
Mm-hmm.
That whole twisted ideology, but
the mark of Cain as well.
Yes, the mark of Cain, yeah. And that jumps.
Oh, I forgot about that, because the Mormons like to use that later when they talk about people being pure of color. Oh, I forgot about that.
Yes,
yeah, from Book of Mormon as well.
Yep.
It's deeply ingrained, maybe not as upfront, but it's behind the whole notion of spiritual warfare. And that gets into this dominionist ideology, and then that gets into our churches, whether even before dominionism became a thing. Most people don't realize dominionism as a whole goes back to the 30s. Gee, I wonder why. And yes, there is a connection, but
in some places earlier, funny enough, yeah.
You know, so for people like us who were raised in the church, we, you know, we're being taught this, even though we didn't realize we were being taught this. And I can guarantee most preachers probably didn't even realize they were teaching this, because the whole thing with the especially with spiritual warfare and the idea of Nephilim still exists, is the us versus them.
Yeah, it becomes institutionalized to the point where you can't even trace back the origin.
Yes.
Because if I ask any random Christian, oh, tell me about the Nephilim or whatever, they'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I get that they're like, what?
Every once in a while, one of them will know. Every once in a while. Yeah. And it's usually the one that's not super fundy. They're the opposite. They're almost about to give up on religion, and they went to Bible school or something and actually read the whole Bible and know the Bible.
Well, and that's the thing.
Yeah, they went to seminary or something. Yeah,
exactly.
They don't even teach it in seminary. They teach
really.
No, the mighty men of old that is mentioned in Genesis 6:4. They take it as being powerful kings or wise men. They teach what's called the Sethian doctrine, which is it's not the Canaanite, or not Canaanite, or it gets so twisted. I've been doing this for 8 years now, and it's like to try to unpack, because there's so many different offshoots, and you have some preachers that just teach it as, oh yeah, there were giants and blah blah blah, but they don't get into all this rigmarole. Then somebody like Jim Wilhelmsman, his whole theology, and he equates Paul's entire theology as combating the giants, and it's like, no. I mean, it gets so whacked, but yeah.
Or when they try to act like Goliath was the last of the Nephilim. It's like, you were the last one we ever saw. It's like, no, every human was 4 feet tall back then. So if a human was 5 or 6 feet tall, they were a fucking giant. Oh my God.
He was just tall. Everyone calm down.
Yeah.
He didn't have rickets.
As tall as Goliath was. It's okay. It's okay.
But it gets into like what Morgan was saying, this whole institutionalization of racism, and it's really, it's a tragedy, really, because I mean, when I went to school, we had a couple black students. I went to a public school on the outskirts of Buffalo, not in the inner city, and I knew both the kids. The son was a classmate. The daughter, I think, was a year or two behind. And the parents had the audacity to purchase a home where I lived, which we were a white suburban town. Black people lived in the city. And it was actually not even a block away from me. And this was like 1979-ish. And the uproar it caused, it was like, even my parents, who I wouldn't say are like pure racist, the typical bullshit stuff about black people being lazy and all of that, yada yada. But my grandmother was still alive, and she was, and this is when I realized she was a fucking racist. And what kills me is that the parents were just like you and I. One was a college professor, just like the Cosbys, huh? A college professor. The other one was a lawyer. I mean, the comments I heard, oh, they're never going to be able to afford it. They're not going to keep up on their mortgage. The yard's going to look like shit. They're going to let the weeds go. It's like they did none of that. I mean, I obviously lost touch after I left for college, because I never moved back home after that. But yeah, it's like, I think, I mean, for me, I mean, that was 40 years ago that the whole idea of racism really became kind of real, but it's gotten worse. I mean, it's like crawling out of the woodwork now.
So I think it's interesting then to talk about like then how to be an ally, especially if we're only talking right now about racism. How then can a white person be an ally without just wearing a safety pin on their shirt?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I've been exploring or trying to explore the last few years. And one of the things that really has stuck out to me that's of vital importance is to not tokenize the people in my life who are people of color, and try to go up to them and be like, so what's it like being black? Like,
oh God,
have you ever experienced racism? Like, what's it, and like ask these like really, like, there's a discussion about intention, right? And then there's a discussion about impact. Like, it's, if you can learn anything about what it's like to be a person of color, and I'm speaking only regarding the education I've had thus far, I'm not speaking for people of color, is that they've lived a life full of racism, and all of a sudden their white buddy has the luxury of learning about racism because we didn't need to know our entire lives, and possibly we gaslit them the entire way. And all of a sudden, woo, we have time and space to talk about, racism, and we want them to give us racism 101 when their whole life is filled with that shit. So one of the first things I learned was leave your fucking friends of color alone unless they've made it extremely clear that they're game to talk about this. And I've heard the same kinds of things come from individuals. And I know that Sammy just walked away, but I've heard this from individuals who are trans, like that they're constantly all day long having to give trans 101 to everyone. And any of us who have any kind of identity that's marginalized or whatever, I'm sure you can start to relate. Like, I have to do poly 101. For me, it's not so taxing, again, which is probably why I'm not really part of the LGBTQIA thing, because I don't have any trauma around this shit. But trans individuals, people of color are expected to educate other people who have the luxury of not knowing that this kind of shit exists. So like, that's one of the first, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I think that's where, you being from Minnesota, see, I'm from Mississippi. So there is a saying when me and a friend have where we're like, there ain't no progressive like a Mississippi progressive. And I think it is because like we are the blackest state in the country, so like you see this institutionalized racism in action up close and personal. You can't really avoid it unless there are certain pockets and bubbles where you are, able to very exclusionary wealthy communities, that kind of thing, just like anywhere else. But here it's, and of course with, our past and our present and unfortunately looks to be our future, it's, you can't ignore it. But again, there still is this archetype down here to this day, like what I was talking about before, that unless you are a Klan member and you are literally saying things like black people are less than white people or, something like that, then you're not racist. So there still is that mentality here, but I see the effects of institutionalized racism, I feel like, to a higher degree than somebody who might live in Ohio, per se, or, one of these whiter areas, for sure.
Well, I know here where I'm in Pennsylvania, it's really bizarre because I live almost right in the middle of the state. And the KKK actually has part of its origins not even 30 miles from me. In fact, I found out after the fact that somebody I knew, their father, or her grandfather, was part of the KKK. And as things have progressed in the last 2 years, it's like everywhere I go, because we have, actually, I don't think we have any anymore. Well, yes, we do, his son, but we have maybe 2 African Americans living in this area. We have a couple Hispanics. But it's like you would think, according to the way some of these people around here talk, that we were like being inundated. Like they're everywhere. And I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ. It's like 2, 3 people. 10 maybe total as far as people of color go. And it's like, oh, they're taking over the town. I mean, it's Republican, but it's like Trump Republican. And it's just really bizarre because I grew up outside of Buffalo where, racism, or as we see it today, was not, I mean, it was there, but it was not a thing back when I grew up. But I reconnected with a high school friend. And this is in Buffalo, New York, people, okay? Nowhere near the fucking South. He posted his new truck online, this was about a year or so ago, with a fucking Confederate flag. You could see the gun rack with the gun in the back window of his pickup truck. And I'm thinking, what the fuck? You're from Buffalo, New York. It's like, it's crazy. It's nuts to see that, because, I mean, here it's normal. Up there, it never was. And now it's like, it's just becoming so bizarro. And it's like, I think the best thing I've done for myself is I follow a couple people that are of color to try to see things through their eyes, because they do post publicly about issues. So it's kind of interesting to ponder what they write and to see if it conflicts with what I believe. And I find that kind of helpful, because it's like, holy shit, I never thought of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. It's like, but yeah, I mean, being an ally can run the gamut.
I think another super important thing I learned about as an ally, and really just in life in general, is knowing that you're going to be wrong. Like all of the time, pretty much. And that you better, if you, like, a lot of people when Trump was elected were like getting energy around, oh my God, I want to be an ally. I want to be an ally. And so you see a lot of Facebook conversations happening where they're discussing this shit. But then these people who want to be an ally so bad, as soon as those people they're trying to ally for would show up on their thread and challenge something that they were saying, they'd get extremely defensive.
Oh, yeah.
This happens when men want to be woke and talk about sexism with women. It's the same thing. They pose themselves as wanting to have an authentic discussion. They want to talk about something, but then pretty quickly shoot women down, refuse to hear their story, to believe their story.
Yep.
So it's just doubling down. So like that's another big
And
takeaway.
then eventually they'll say, this is why no one's an ally to you. Because
Yep,
I've even had this
exactly.
happen when
Yeah.
I was on an LGBTQ panel for this event that we had at Ole Miss. And they invited me as a representative from the law school and as a bisexual. And so I was there. And I don't know, and I guess he was with some kind of group on campus that was like supposed to be offering like some kind of support, because it wasn't like an inherently LGBTQ organization who was on the panel along with me. But he did mention this thing. He said, well, it makes me not want to be an ally when, people are mean to me or whatever. And I was just like, and my side eye I'm surprised he did not burst into flames. Like, it was rough. I could not control my facial expressions. I was like Michelle Obama at the inauguration. I was just like, what is happening? And like, me and some people exchanged looks, and it's rough because, and somebody did bring up a point. They were like, we don't owe you that. Like, it's not, and then also that shows you're probably not an ally anyway. If we're
If
just
you're
like,
only doing it if it's convenient and people
if
are
it's
nice to
convenient
you.
for you, if it's convenient for you and you're not willing to look at your own behavior, because again, that's how we get past these institutionalized marginalizations of communities. We have to, be willing to learn and be willing to listen to people who are actually in those communities, and then, try to change our actions to reflect that, or try to learn more, or just shut up and listen and let them lead. But yeah, and when you reveal that, it's just like, okay, well, what were you in it for? Did you just want to get some woke points or make you feel like you're woker than everybody else? But
17 woke points.
yeah,
For
it's to
Gryffindor.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're getting these points and they're being like, oh, look at me, I'm such a good leftist. And I'm like, no, your leftism is fucking trash.
Yeah.
Like, it is trash if you do not include marginalized communities in that, and then you don't listen, and you don't
Yeah.
listen to them, even if you're posturing yourself as that. Like,
Yeah.
I know so many trash leftist men. Yeah.
This is another really interesting conversation that I like having about the two kinds of approaches that you can have to people like that or near to like that, because there are those people that are just going to be assholes and it's really difficult to talk to them. But there's a lot, like if we're going to talk about sexism right now, there are a lot of men that I have met who don't understand Me Too or think that it's gone too far, or they have some controversial views about it. Like, I don't feel like I know how to talk to women anymore. I feel like this whole thing has gotten derailed. But they're very hesitant. They're very afraid to say that because there's some kind of resistance. They know that something's up, but they just, they don't feel like they can say it. And I've come across a lot of those guys, and to an extent, this isn't a popular opinion, but I feel for them, not because I think that they're right, but because I think that they could be fantastic allies. And I think that it is not our obligation to educate them. It is not. But for those of us who have the capacity to do so, that have the opportunity to do so, that have the metaphorical spoons, if you use that metaphor, to do so, do it. Yeah, do it. Like I have the capacity to do that when it comes to talking about sexism, because I just feel comfortable doing that. Not everybody else does. So I really like talking to men like that, because they I think they end up learning a lot about their own toxic masculinity, because I think that's the blindness that they have, that they don't realize that their toxic masculinity is feeding into those behaviors that's causing this. And being able to have a conversation where they're not attacked all the time is helpful. Again, we're not obligated to be nice. We are not obligated to educate. But I see those men as assets, resources. Let's objectify them for once. And that we can, some of us, those who want to, can try to educate, can try to meet them where they're at, to kind of bring them in and help them understand. And again, now we can zoom out and we can talk about whatever kind of social justice arena that we want to talk about in this way. Like whatever you have capacity to teach about, go for it, teach it, make these people allies, because it's so clear they want to be allies. Like these people, these men who have really good intentions, that they want to be allies. And there is, I think, a little bit of a rough thing going on where those of us who are in a marginalized community, when we're talking about these social justice things, we get so fucking pissed off when these people don't fucking get it, and you don't want to give them the time of the day. You don't want to have to slow down and explain to them the most basic thing that you've experienced your whole fucking life. It just makes you pissed off. And that's okay. You don't have to do that. But I think if we can get these guys on board,
yeah, it's just hard because, there are these, the sea lions, as you will, the people who pretend that they are just, I'm just asking questions.
Yeah, that's a whole
I'm just
different
asking
group.
questions, but yeah, that's a whole different group. And it is sometimes difficult, to tell. But then again, like you said about people of color and not tokenizing them and not being like, hey, have you experienced racism? Like, these men don't need to come up to random women and be like, so explain to me feminism. Like, like you can go, if someone has, said
Sounds
that,
like a
hey,
mansplaining trap. That's a mansplaining trap waiting to happen. Like right there.
yeah,
You need that little
exactly.
Akbar meme, like it's a trap. That's the trap right there. Like,
Yeah, yeah. So again, it's like if somebody like yourself has, come forward and said, hey, I'm willing to talk about these issues, you can ask me questions that you may not be, that other people may not be comfortable with you just blurting them out at like massive groups of women and, expecting them to cater to you and hold your hand and educate you through this. But yeah, there's nothing wrong as long as you're speaking to someone who has said that they are willing to share that or indicated that they're willing to share that information and knowledge.
Yep.
But yeah, I completely get that. But at the same time, yeah, it is very exhausting when, it's being asked of either disingenuously or when that's been done so many times, eventually it's just like, well, fuck it, I can't tell who's being, genuine or who's just waiting to come back. And, like we talked about, these people who say they're allies, but then they don't want to listen. They get very defensive. And so then when you're met with that, I mean, even if they're not sea lining, but they really think that they're a feminist ally or something, it's hard because, it's like, well, I'm talking to you, but you don't want to listen. But so, yeah, that's why I think it's important that you figure out, who would be kind of open to it and, just, yeah, I mean, people who are willing to talk about it are obviously talking about it. So.
Right. And I think another important thing is if anyone is listening who is working on becoming a better ally, I think one of the phenomenons that I'm seeing is that they get frustrated when they tap into different resources, being it a book, being it a video, being it a person, and all of those. Let's talk about sexism, right? There's a man who's trying to get woke about sexism. He talks to different people. He has different videos, and he's getting different messages. And he's getting a woman who's willing to talk about it and can talk about it articulately. He's getting another woman who says, no, sexism doesn't exist. I don't see it at all. He's talking to another woman who is pissed, rips off his fucking head because he's ignorant and bringing this shit up. And he's gonna run into a lot of different reactions. And I've seen this where men are like, women they're not even on the same page. I'm getting all sorts of conflicting information. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. There's no way I can do it perfectly. There's no way to be the right ally. There's no way I can do this so that everyone, like, no one's going to be happy. And I think that's another interesting phenomenon of allyship, of the social justice thing, that this group that we're talking about, whether it's women, whether it's people of color, whether it's trans people, they are not homogenous, and they are not going to have the same reactions. Not all of them are going to know that they are affected by, whatever, transphobia, racism, sexism. Not all of them are going to be woke about it. They're, not all of them are going to be educated about it. Not all of them, not every Black person knows everything about Martin Luther King Jr. Like, there's going to be all sorts of different people, and it all fits. It all is part of the same story. It doesn't need to flow together perfectly. It's all part of the same structure. And like, that was the other thing that I figured out on my own journey, that yes, these conflicting stories and reactions don't contradict each other. They are all part of the same thing.
I think that's a really good point, because that's something I am experiencing myself. As one thing I do like to do, I'm in a lot of different groups and a lot of different debate groups. Although I haven't lately been paying too much attention, because some of them are really getting Fruit Loopy, and I mean in a not bad way, but just weird.
Yeah.
And I see these different experiences, and then I compare it to my own, and I fall into I don't consider myself as one to ever have experienced sexism, but I think basically I just pretty much fucking ignored it, because I was me. I mean, basically what you see is what you get. I am in a job that when I started it was male dominated. So I just kind of blew it off. It never, quote, affected me. I didn't care what people said, and I still don't. I get called a bitch all the time, even at work. But yeah, I think that's interesting that they're all. I'm going to have to maybe even focus more on that they're all part of the same story.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, that's why, I think before, when I was working through my understanding of racism, I would feel really defensive when I came across maybe like a blog. I read a lot of this stuff on medium.com is where I get a lot of that information. It's super helpful. And I would come across a blog post that would be like very strongly worded from a person of color being like, don't talk about my hair. Like, don't make comments about my hair. And I would read the article and be like, whoa, like, what's going on? Why are they so like defensive? And I would feel defensive of myself. But I've come to the point where now I honor that. Like, I look at that article and I'm like, yep, I honor your anger. I honor the words that you're using. I honor what's going on with you. And then I read a different article from a person of color that has a completely different tone, different message, different point. And I honor that too. It's all part of the same story of people working through their shit, people expressing their anger about their racism, and they all fit. And it's made it easier for me to hear those angry stories, to realize that those are valid. That's a valid feeling to express, just as well as any like grounded, rational, reasonable kind of expression that we demand of people of color all the time, that they need to be so like articulate and calm, which is fucked up. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I mean, coming from, one that's not, I'm really not knowledgeable at all, to be honest. It's like you have to take in as much as you possibly can to try and understand where they're coming from. And I think, like, going back to the whole Black Lives Matter issue, and I think what really solidified it for me was starting to see these stories about, Black men being shot. I mean, unarmed. And it's like, wait a minute, I know 4 or 5 cops, state police, and patrol officers, and they were never trained that way. They would never do what is happening now. They were taught to de-escalate. And I just saw a video clip the other day, and I haven't vetted it, so I don't know if it's, the backstory, and we probably won't know for another year or two because it just happened. Pulled over some guy, and there's a dash cam video. I think there was a dash cam video. 4 kids in the car. 1 kid got shot in the head. It's like, how can they not be angry about that?
I've heard a lot of reports that is a valid video, sadly. So
Wow.
I mean, it was just something that came through my news feed, so while I was in the middle of something else, so I didn't really. It's like, and I'm seeing these types of stories day in and day out, and it's like, and people wonder why they're angry. I mean, there has to be something to it. I mean, that kind of sounds like a cop out, bad word, a a cop out reason, but it's like, without delving into things and really finding out what's going on, you see these headlights and you just wonder. And I'm being PM, so wow, who would have thought that we'd be almost done? Like 9:13. It's like, where the fuck did the time go?
good times to good people.
Well, I have to honestly admit, Marie, your point of view and Morgan's and Sam's, it's fascinating to me, and not in a bad way, because it does. I mean, I do ponder a lot of what we talk about on the show, or when I'm in the, I think about this stuff, but I think for someone like me, and I'm pretty sure there's others just like me, I live in a very rural area. I'm 3 hours from Pittsburgh, 3 hours from Buffalo, my hometown. And I'm 5 hours from Philly. I'm literally in the middle of buttfuck nowhere. And I don't drive. And I probably never will be able to drive because I see 2 of everything, which would not be good on the road. So I'm like literally stuck here. I literally am a quote keyboard warrior. But I think, learning as much as I can about these issues, I think is so majorly important. And when there's individuals that know more than I do, I soak up everything that they say. So it's like, I really appreciate,
Who is this person friending? Oh, never mind. No, I'm just
That's me.
no, sweet thing. I'm just being a twit. No. I was trying to find you on Facebook, actually, because I every time we have a guest, I always try to pimp out their page. So I finally found your fucking page, so I can pimp it out to all my friends. So
well, you could
awesome.
have asked me. I could have sent you, and it's in the description, dummy. Oh, I may not have put your Facebook page on there because I really don't like to without asking first.
Yeah.
But even though it's in the description, where can we find you? Besides
Right
on other
here.
people's, yeah, I know you're right there.
Yeah, you can find my podcast on everyone'sagnostic.com. And we've got a lot of stuff out there. You can look through our episodes. You can read a little bit about the show. You can read about me and Cass. You can go to a retreat that we're having in October in Tennessee.
I keep seeing that, and I'm like, oh.
You want to do it?
Yeah, but financially I can't.
Yeah. And then, oh, yes, I recall what you said earlier. And then also it has information on there about the guy that you were talking about at the top of the show, Dave Warnock, who has been on Life After God, Your Atheist Pastor, Dogma Debate. He's going to be on the Shunned podcast and a bunch of other ones. And we are kind of representing him because it's just easy to do so, and he's part of our community. He actually lives with Cass right now. So if you're interested to learn more about him, he's got a page on there as well with a blog and some information about or the different interviews that he's done. I would recommend the Dogma debate one. That was my favorite one by far. That was a good one. So yeah, that's where we are, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, we're on Twitter. Nobody interacts with us on Twitter, so I don't know what I'm doing, but that's fine. I don't fucking care. So yeah. That's us.
Awesome. Miss Morgan, where can we find you besides in the middle of a law book?
Well, you can find me on Facebook at Morgan L. Stringer. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Mostring, Mostring. And also, if you want to bring up Deb in your attempts to troll in our chat, I will ban you.
Yeah.
But I will also shame you. Because you are not worth anything compared to Deb. So you can fuck off. That's it. Sorry.
And I will add, I will find you.
Yeah.
And Miss Sammy, Deb's daughter. Where can we find you, my dear?
Not sharpening anything, I swear. No, you can. Actually, funny enough, speaking of lovely Deb, I'm actually working on a project associated with her. I'm not going to bring up a lot of specifics about it because I'm going to burn myself out if I do, and I need to do things right and do it proper. But there is something cool and creative associated with her coming up, so I will definitely be giving more hints of that in the future as soon as it sort of forms itself. But again, I'm just getting over a crazy move. I'm finally settled in and just trying to get all that worked out. So everything's been a little bit delayed for a bit, but I haven't forgotten about y'all, and I love that y'all still keep up with us.
Yes. Easiest way to find me is on Dune. Yeah, on Dune.
You're the planet Dune.
No, that's what a treaty, Muad'Dib.
You'd just be riding the worm. We would just pull up and you'd just be riding
no,
that
I'd
thing
be
like a cowboy.
off the fucking worm. Who are you kidding? Hell, I can't even walk to the fucking bank I discovered today. God, my legs are so bad this morning. But you can find me on Twitter at Dune998. So, and that connects to my blog. And yes, I'm still blogging about Jillian, but it's just, I got some weird posts coming up because some of her videos are just comical. And I'm having fun with those ones. But anyways, you can also find me on Facebook under Beth A. Hambridge, as well as YouTube, although I haven't put anything new out yet. I keep saying I'm going to do a video, and then I end up with a 20,000 word essay, and that's like way too long for a video. I would bore you all to death. So that's the easiest way. Let me pull up my calendar here and tell you what's coming up. Next week we have Mike Bowler. He's my favorite conspiracy person. And yeah, we're going to talk about the Genesis 6-4 giants for a specific reason, because it's not just, bitch, but the whole notion of the spiritual warfare and how it's being conspiratorized, if that's a word. So yeah, it's funny that it's like just the last week I've seen a buttload of stuff about the whole spiritual warfare stuff, and now people are really trying to prove that giants still exist, or the spirit of the giants still exists. So we're gonna delve into that. I'm still working on an outline for that, and then the week after we have Nathan Dickey on, who I forgot his podcast, but he's relaunching. I think he dropped his first episode of the reboot sometime this week through Patreon, so we'll have him. And I have a few more non-confirmed yet, but I'm hoping to bring in some more sciencey stuff with GMOs with the Farm Babe. Have an email I'm getting ready to send out, so hopefully that'll be coming up in the next couple weeks. And I do have one confirmed for May. I gotta find it. Okay, maybe I don't. Oh, that was Nathan. But yeah, we got a couple more guests coming on, so we shall see what happens. And Brie, I thank you again. Wonderful. And I gotta say, you're fucking cute.
Oh,
Mhm.
Your
Very much.
smile, I mean, it's your whole, when you smile, your whole face lights up. And I think that's just so fucking cute.
thank
sorry.
you.
I just say this, I don't know why I'm like, I'm so
I'm red now.
yeah. But you have a wonderful personality, and thank you so much for joining our rat race and totally unscripted, because I had no idea how to even approach this because I'm so clueless.
That's perfect. That works for me. I can deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, it's just I say what I think, so I'm not ashamed to admit that I'm wrong, and that's something you had mentioned too. And I know I have a shit ton to learn, but you only learn by asking questions.
Yes. And with that, I'll put out a movie recommendation for you guys with kids. If you're atheist or a critical thinker at all here, and you want to watch a movie with your kids, go to Redbox and rent a movie called Smallfoot. It is about religion and how fucked up it is, and it's a kids movie. It's
Wow.
so
All
great.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you get a chance, and well, I'm thinking of it.
Wait, rent movies? Rent to what?
Or stream it, whatever.
Are we gonna read a serialized Fitzgerald and have an ether frolic? And oi, back in my day, what is this renting movies shit? No.
Go to your local Blockbuster.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
whatever. Get a record.
Hurry
I don't
before it
care.
all runs out.
Is it on vinyl?
Well,
Is it on
that'd
vinyl?
be a hell of a drive, because I think the only one left is in like Washington State.
No, it's in Alaska.
Oh, is it Alaska?
yeah.
Oh, God,
Yeah,
that's
it's
even
in
worse.
Alaska. They did a feature on it on John Oliver's show.
That's where I
think
saw
last
it.
year.
Yeah, I didn't. I thought it was Washington.
Yeah, but I've read a few articles about it. It's pretty great.
Yeah. So, yeah, send me the titles to the movie and the two books you mentioned earlier,
it.
so I can put that in the show description. So with that, folks, we shall see you next week. Same time, same channel, same batshit crazy women. Murray won't be here unless she wants to be.
I'll still be batshit crazy though. Don't worry about it.
Good.
But I hope you all have a good night, and we will see you next week. Peace, y'all.
Meow.